Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the fourth episode of the Soul Surplus Podcast. I'm your host, Wes Pendleton, along with my co-host, John Smythe. We are very, very excited to tackle this subject for today. But before we get started, how was your weekend, John?
My weekend was pretty peaceful. My girlfriend had an event at her church, so got to spend some time with her. And my brother goes to her church as well, so it was a good time.
It was a family affair, basically.
Absolutely.
Word.
How was yours?
It was good. Doing a little bit of troubleshooting on some things for the company, but pretty much was a restful weekend. Once again, just like last weekend, pretty much just watched basketball and was on my laptop and watching basketball at the same time, just all weekend, basically.
I've been hearing all of yesterday how the Sixers I guess they're going to finalize something today, or there's a big game. Is that tonight?
That's tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Well,
yeah.
Shows how much I know once again.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Well, let's hop right into it, man. This is, I really love talking about this particular subject. This is actually one of the things that I feel like over the last 2 to 3 years, I've had this conversation more with producers than any other conversation. And when you presented this idea to talk about, I was really excited. I was like, oh yeah, we definitely got to do this. So our subject today is alternative ways to make money as a producer. So we wanted to talk about some of the paths of how we got here today ourselves, having priorities, importance, and timing, tips to help people find out how they can make more money, fulfilling a need, getting rid of your pride, knowing when to say yes and no. Those are the kind of the bullet points for today, and I'm just really, really excited to tackle this. And so I feel like we have a unique perspective in that. I mean, you're a lot younger than me, so I've been a producer for a lot longer than you, but you've been producing for quite a while. But the fact that we are sound designers as well has shifted that priority where we're not producing as much as we used to.
Right.
And interestingly enough, I'm probably making three to four times as much money as I was making when I was doing production full time. And so we wanted to talk about how we got to this point, our journeys in getting here. And I guess we could start out with you, Smythe. Let the people know how you got up to this point today, man.
Yeah, so I think my perspective is also a little different because I'm also coming from a gigging musician standpoint. That's really where I got started.
Right.
So I guess if we go back to when I first started playing, I picked up the guitar, eventually started playing in church, and eventually started playing with a band. And I realized I could make money from this. And
Right.
And it's important to note that we're in the Philly area, and the culture for gigging musicians, I'm not sure what it's like. It's probably very similar in a lot of different places. But in Philly has a reputation for having a vast amount of backing musicians who are on some really, really major tours.
Right.
You could be somewhere like Time, or you could be at Bourbon and Branch here in Philly, and you could be talking to someone who was just in South America on tour, or you could be in a hole in the wall church and you could see a musician playing who is on tour with Lady Gaga or something crazy like that.
Right.
So needless to say, the culture for gigging musicians around here, there's some things that come with it. So right. I was playing and I started gigging out more, started making more money, and I was getting better, and I had the skill to be doing these major gigs, and I was doing major gigs, just not really touring. I was doing more fly dates, flying out to different places. And I got the chance to do some really cool things, and I still get the chance to do those things. And playing with major artists, R&B legends. I did a few dates with people like Regina Belle and Freddie Jackson. I did a gig with Freddie Jackson. to things like Creation Fest, like doing dates with like Sho Baraka, or like doing a date with like Andy Mineo.
Right.
Yeah, so there's more, but if I was to be really honest, I was not making the money from gigging like I really wanted to.
Right. Yeah, so, it's definitely a grind.
It is absolutely a grind. So at the time I was working in a college bookstore, a college that I had been dropped out of. But then eventually I started to do more studio sessions, and last year was actually a pretty good year for me. So I was doing studio sessions as a session musician, but eventually got more into production. And last year was actually a pretty good year for me as far as in terms of what I had already done before. I got a few placements last year on some pretty cool records. So of course I'm not like Metro Boomin, or I'm not even, but yeah. Point is, like, my name is out there, I'm not like I'm of the talk of the town, but point is, like, I got some credits to my name,
Yeah, you're doing all right for yourself.
Yeah. But the thing is, if I was to be truthful, even in that in itself is a grind as well.
Yep.
And
a lot of late nights.
Yeah, I would compare it to it's almost like the same thing as trying to be a touring musician. And it's you kind of gotta kiss people's butts sometimes.
Right.
And not that there's anything wrong, like, not there's anything absolutely wrong with kissing butts, but I'm not a butt kisser.
Yeah. And you and I are very, very similar in with that specifically. And Whit and I talk about this all the time. It's a lot of the reason why I kind of hit a ceiling and never went any further. I'm not going to change who I am to make a record. I'm just not going to do it. So, right. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not going to bend over backwards to make you feel comfortable so that I can be on a record with you. I'm not going to do it. Either you like it or you don't. End of discussion.
Absolutely. And I'm really grateful because I have a lot of mentors and friends who are older than me in the touring and gigging world. And then people like you and people like Whit and my brother, who I can look at the path that you guys have taken and say, all right, maybe this is not necessarily how far I want to go with this.
Right.
But I do know that I want something that is consistent and steady. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because I was able to see the grind and able to see the pros and cons of each side of things.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a really key thing, like that network. But anyway, fast forward to now, I started, you asked me to do a sample pack, which turned into 2, which turned into 4,
right. Which turned into a job.
Yep. And so, yeah, here we are.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because, I just had a conversation with one of my good friends the other day, and, he was just saying how proud he was of the whole team. Just seeing how we were basically in a roundabout way able to do an about face, because it's kind of totally different direction.
Right.
And he was, and I was even telling him how I don't talk from my personal Twitter account anymore. It's just all about Soul Surplus, and he was like, that's really interesting that you would do that, because I would think that, like, the face of the company, would be out front and saying this and saying that. And I was like, well, the thing is, I'm not the face of the company. The company is the face of the company. So,
right.
Me being out in the front with some pom-poms is not necessary when the brand culture and the brand presentation speaks for itself. So it's interesting just to see, and he's saying that because he's seen where I was 10 years ago, and so I guess I can kind of give my story. So, I was working a regular corporate type job and left that job. And in the meantime, I was just like, I got to figure out a way to make some money. And I had just started getting my foot in the door with doing production on a regular basis. And so little by little, I feel like I had like a couple advantages because I was able to work with some well-known artists, and that kind of opened the door for me to hop, skip, and jump some of the regular types of things that a lot of producers go through, except for the fact that I had put in mad work for like 5 or 6 years before this happened. And so it kind of just like from a timing standpoint, everything kind of happened at the right time. So it wasn't an overnight success. It was like 5 or 6 years worth of work, and then I finally broke through. But anyway, this is around the time when like social media is really taking off. MySpace is really popping. I did very, very, very well because of MySpace, and then transferring from MySpace over into, early Facebook time when it was available for everybody. I did really well, during what I consider like the best boom years for producers on the internet.
Yeah.
I was making, sometimes I'd make $5,000 to $6,000 a month. I was doing really well, and literally just working at the crib. I wasn't, doing anything crazy. But then streaming came along, and, because of streaming, everything has been affected by streaming. So labels are spending less money, artists are spending less money. The bottom line ends up being the producer who kind of loses, kind of gets the short end of the stick,
It's a shame.
I mean, it is what it is. I'm one of the few people that don't get mad about it. I'm just like, hey man, this life comes and changes, and you got to figure out a way to change it up. So you go through the process of like noticing that like every year your yearly income is going down a little bit too much. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And thankfully I was, I've always been a graphic designer and, the creative side. So that kind of picked up the slack, thankfully. But yeah, so like, I got to a point where, quote unquote, my name wasn't really ringing out like it used to. And I was totally fine with that. I was just like, I had my time, and, it's now time for me as a producer to go ahead and ride off into the sunset, but I got to do something different. And so from that point, I talked to the fellas and, I say, hey guys, I have an idea I think would be really, really great. And, we talked about, forming Soul Surplus. And so that's how we got to where we are today. Wow. What I'm saying? It's kind of like the same type of trajectory, but, there's a couple points within that story that we'll definitely get into, which I think it's like the second tip that we're going to go over today.
Right.
That's embedded in that story that I really want to make sure that I cover. So that was that was our trajectory, and here we are today, man.
Yeah, and you know what? I think even what you said works into the first point, which is the importance of knowing what's working and what isn't.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I admire about you is how you pay attention to everything that's happening within the music business, whether it directly affects you or not.
Right.
So, maybe I should invest my time into this because this is what producers need. This is we're fulfilling a need for producers or people who need music for licensing.
Right.
And maybe you're not going to get as much into distributing CDs.
Right. As you shouldn't.
Right. But yeah, so I guess what were some of the things you saw around the time or a little before the time you started Soul Surplus, things that were working and things that weren't working for you?
As a producer, so one of the most indicating points was the fact that I'm a big data guy, as I've probably said multiple times on this podcast, and my numbers were going down and the responses were going down, and my phone wasn't ringing as much anymore, and it's interesting because my close friends are like, you're better than you've ever been. And I'm like, yeah, but it's just not the same anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it kind of got to a place where I started noticing that people were calling me OG and stuff like that a lot. And so I was just like, okay, people are kind of treating me like I'm retired. I'm still working, my guys.
Yeah.
I'm still here. But but that's okay. It's okay. You know, it reminds me of, like, I never went into doing music with the idea of, I never wanted to be a producer past 35 anyway. So I literally, when I started recognizing it, I was 35, like right on the dot. So it's kind of like almost like I had forgotten that I was supposed to hang it up anyway.
Yeah.
And then it was just like, hey man, guess what? You're 35 and nobody cares anymore. You know what I'm saying? and I'm obviously it's not that nobody cares. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I understand.
But yeah, it was just one of those things where I equate it to, I think Charles Barkley says, you know, with basketball, he said, you only have but so many jumps in those legs. You know, there's going to be a time when, you know, Father Time is undefeated. So you're going to have to retire one day. You know what I mean? And not necessarily not be part of the game. But if you're going to be part of the, like Charles is again the perfect example. So he stopped playing, but now he has a second career in the NBA as an analyst on TNT. And I use the word analyst very loosely because Charles is really just talking on television.
Yeah.
You know.
But look at him. Charles Barkley is well known. I came around Charles Barkley from Space Jam. I didn't know Charles Barkley as, was he a power forward?
Yep.
I didn't know him as the dominant player. Of course, I figured that out. But,
right.
You know, I was able to see somebody like Michael Strahan, who I'm a New York Giants fan, so Michael Strahan is a legend to me.
Trash.
Whatever, man.
I'm just
Super Bowl champs. You know, Eagles. I was
about to say, yeah, keep it moving.
But yeah, you know, somebody like Michael Strahan, who, like Barkley, made a second career, which is really dope. I did want to say, you know, kind of what you're saying reminds me of the last track on J. Cole's album, 1985.
Mm-hmm.
So I took a listen to that album Saturday. I had a long car ride up to New York, and in the song he talks about, it's kind of a song to younger rappers, and he's saying, one day, what made you famous, people aren't gonna like because your fans are gonna grow up.
Yep.
So what are you gonna do then?
Yep.
You're not gonna be able to tour because nobody's gonna be there because they don't like the thing that made you famous anymore. You know.
Yep.
And I think that relates really well. Not that you were getting placements on, you know, bad music or anything, but things change, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. And I think the thing that I had going for me was I never went into music production with these ideas of like, you know, oh man, I'm going to be, you know, the next Dr. Dre. I never thought about it in that way. I really had more of like a tradesman mentality of, I'm just going to work every day and, you know, just take one step at a time and, you know, move up little by little. But, you know, I had no desire to hit like a grand slam. And then also too, like there's this part of me that also still kind of likes to be private in some ways, which is weird because I'm on a podcast telling my life story. But it's different because, you know, I still feel like that there's a bit of privacy for all of us, you know. Like I don't like to share my family online.
Right.
You know, I love to have my family to myself. And so like being like really, really popular is not really, it's just one of those things that I never wanted to go in that direction because I've seen so many guys like there's guys that we know that are friends, you know, some of these guys that you did records for, these guys are in prisons because they can't do anything because they're famous. You know what I'm saying? I never want to be in that position where every time I open my mouth, somebody's going to think what I say is problematic, or I never, you know what I'm saying? Or it's just, who wants to live that way to get a couple of dollars? Like it's just not worth it. So when it came to that point where it was just like, you know, I think I need to make the pivot it was okay. I was totally fine.
Yeah. It's funny. We are very similar in ways. And similar.
I think we're similar a lot.
Yeah, definitely. I think that in a lot of the things that we do, but I think I sort of had a little different of a motivation, or either just my personality is different because, hey, I don't mind being known, but I'm naturally a performer, so
Yeah.
I like to be out in front of people.
Right. See, and that's where you and I are totally different.
Right.
I will be all the way under the stage. I don't want anybody to see me at all.
Under the stage, in the pit.
Exactly.
But it's funny, like what happened to you was very similar to what happened to me, and part of it was my own doing. Me separating myself from certain scenes that I didn't want to be around and certain gigs that I didn't want to do. But then also the fact that I don't always get a chance to do the gigs that I want to do. So actually one thing that I didn't talk about was teaching. I forgot to mention that. That was actually a big part, something that I still do.
I was about to say, low-key your job.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, before Soul Surplus, that was like your full-time job. Now it's your part-time job.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So I had to realize that gigging was not being as fruitful as I really wanted it to be. And it really took me being honest and not holding on to a dream and really putting in check, what am I doing this for?
Right.
So the same way that you did this every day, you made it a priority, which is actually our second point. It's the same way that I made music a priority, and I knew that I did this because I loved it. And there was a few things I love to do. I didn't do this because I want to be on tour or I want to be seen. Although, like I said, I do enjoy it, but my motivation, the reason I do this is because I genuinely love it.
Right.
So,
and I can attest to that for sure.
Right. Yeah. But I do want to talk about the second point, which was having our priorities in check, making money versus following a passion, and when those things align and when they clash, which can be pretty devastating.
Yes.
And we were kind of already hitting that.
Right.
I can say that I'm really in a place where it's starting to align for me. But there were times where I was doing gigs and I realized I don't really like doing this. I was doing gigs for free, and I'll always enjoy it, but it was a thing where, this is not really what I want to be doing, or it was a gig where I was making money, but the music is not fun, or it's just not something that I really like. So yeah, there's times when the money is definitely important, but then there's also times where that it's you need to do something that's going to be fulfilling for you. Do you have any experience with that? Or
yeah, I mean that's a lot of reason why I never, like I said, I had like a glass ceiling that I never went past, is because I wasn't going to make a ludicrous beat when I don't make ludicrous beats.
Yeah,
I just wasn't going to do that. Like that's not me, and it is like pulling teeth to get me to go there. And I even think, like, it's funny because we're talking about making money versus following a passion. It wasn't until I was probably 6 or 7 years into making money as a producer that I realized that it kind of really wasn't my passion. Wow. It was just the way that I could make money because I was good at it. And so, music was more of my job, but my passion with music really comes more from being creative with those tools, and then also being able to get those things out to the right people. So I love that part of it. But I didn't necessarily love being a producer. You know what I'm saying? So, and it's interesting because they were kind of in a line for a while, and then it started getting to that place where it was like, to make more money, I would definitely have to do something that I didn't want to do. And I was just like, I would much rather like lose money and be okay with myself than to be making a whole bunch of money and be miserable.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I just wasn't gonna allow that to happen. And so when I took some time off and went to, it's weird because I took some time off by going back to work, which sounds dumb because basically I didn't take any time off, but I took time off from doing music or anything, anything pertaining to music, to go to work. And I think that was the best thing that happened to me, because it was in that time that I recognized like, so I guess we can kind of go from right here into the 3 tips, because the first tip in our 3 tips is like what I'm about to say.
Okay.
So when I went back to work, I recognized that in order to run a successful business or brand, you basically have to fulfill a need. And that's our first point and our first tip for the listeners for today, in finding alternative ways to make money. So number 1, you need to fulfill a need. And we fulfill a need with Soul Surplus in that we provide compositions that the creator can use without worrying about getting in trouble over because of copyright issues and all that jazz. And so with technology going further and further in the direction of being able to detect anything, and copyright laws becoming more strict, it's like the perfect time to come through with a company like ours.
Right.
So, but it really wasn't until I kind of stepped away and was able to see around the situation to realize, okay, so if I want to do it with anything in music, I need to stop serving the customer and start serving the creator.
Right.
So, because the customer is not going to pay money for music anymore. They're just not. But the person who creates the music will always pay money to keep creating.
Yeah. Pretty genius.
I
gotta say.
It's just basic business practice, basic business policy,
Yeah. I remember we talked about this actually when I first met you. We talked about that. And as you were talking, I was thinking about people who are really successful, and fulfilling a need is, I think that's a very business savvy way of fulfilling a need. But even on the gigging level, I realized that the musicians who stick around, they fulfill a need by doing more than one thing.
Yep.
And on the production level, I was thinking about the reason why Weatherman is so successful is because they really do fulfill a need for artists. Because within Weatherman, you have Wit, you have 42 North, you're getting live musicians on your record, which already separates you. You're getting mixing and mastering,
right?
And you're getting top quality sound,
right?
I know, like I said, a few musicians who are successful touring musicians, and the ones who stick around, they're musicians who show up, they know the music, and they also run tracks for the show. They also play more than one instrument if they're needed.
Yep.
So it's all about understanding who your client is and going above and beyond to meet the need, which is, again, like you said, what we do. I really like what we do, because I do believe that we go above and beyond with the things that we make and the services we provide.
Absolutely. And the best part too is that we're able to service more than one type of customer too. So, we service the creative. That's probably like our number one. Our number one customer is always going to be the music producer. But then our number 2 customer client are companies that do exactly what we do. They're just bigger, and so they're looking to find musicians or groups that do what we do, And the one thing that I've been noticing, speaking more and more to some of these reps that come from these companies, is that we scratch an itch that a lot of these companies have been looking for a long time, which is really interesting to me, because there's plenty of other companies that do what we do, but it's interesting to hear them say, but the way that you guys do what you do, we haven't seen that. And I was just like, wow. So fulfilling that need is just super, super important, man. And I guess we can go, right into number 2, because I think there's some things in number 2 that can definitely piggyback off of number 1. So the second tip for the day is getting rid of your pride.
Yeah.
And that was like, that being able to get rid of my pride, and trust me when I tell you, I'm no saint. I'm wildly prideful in other ways. You know what I'm saying? But in this particular area, like my pride as far as being like the guy as a producer, I didn't care. I was just like, that doesn't mean anything anymore. It's not benefiting me. It's not benefiting me anymore the way that it used to. So I need to figure something else to do, because this is just not working. And then realizing and knowing that I need to get rid of that is the thing that allowed me to open my eyes to figure out the need that I needed to fulfill in the first point. You know what I
mean? Yeah. Pride has a lot of different definitions. What I found for me was that nothing is beneath me.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to really believe that in order to, like you said before, do the things that you don't want to do so that you can later do the things that you want to do.
Right.
And man, there's a lot of things I did not want to do, a lot of gigs I did not want to do, a lot of lessons that I did not want to teach. But when you get rid of your pride and you do those things, one of the things that we didn't talk about was the timing of it all. And the timing of when to take certain gigs, or the timing of when to make certain moves. But if you don't, if you think you're above doing certain things, it kind of throws off the timing of it all.
Right.
And so what I mean by that is, I recently just left the job teaching, and I had learned from experience, like, even if I don't like what I'm doing right now, or even if I don't feel like it, I know I gotta stick it through until something better comes along.
Yep.
Because I'm not gonna be out there with my cheeks out looking for money.
Yeah.
When,
For real.
When I had it there, I had the chance to make money there, but I was just too prideful to stick it through.
Yep.
And so I think that also pertains to just the grind of everything, and take your time and learn what you have to learn, and be willing to learn, and be willing to say, yeah, I'm trash right now, or yeah, my mixes sound muddy.
Yep.
Or to say, this person knows more than me. I'm going to listen to them because this can help me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which goes right into the third tip, which is knowing when to say yes and knowing when to say no. So you say yes when you know you need the money, but no when the situation isn't in any way beneficial.
Yeah,
You say yes when you see long-term benefit, even in a short time, but maybe in the short time it's not as fruitful,
Right.
And trust me when I tell you, I get irritated thinking about having these just even since we started Soul Surplus, there's been guys that have come around, yo man, want to see if you could do some production for me, and I'm just like, all right, cool. And it's like, because I know that I want to make a quick $3,000, and like I say yes, and I promise you, every time since I've done that, it's been the worst experience ever.
Really?
In one of those cases, I just straight up returned the money. I was just like, yeah, I don't have time to do this. I'm sorry, but yeah, I just don't have time.
Right.
And yeah, it was just one of those things where like that's the clearest, that money would seem good in that like right away, but in the long term, like me doing that is taking away from me putting in more work for the business so that we can make more revenue for the business overall. And so like I finally put my foot down and I said, I'm just not doing any more outside work, and in that, like I attribute doing something like that to gigging, taking a job outside of like what we do here at the company. It's kind of, for me, it's kind of like gigging in that it's not my 9 to 5. And I'll probably do it and it'll probably be okay. But most likely when I'm doing it, it's probably at night and then I don't get to go to sleep at a decent time. Right. And then when it's done, it's just like, it's done, it's over.
Yeah.
So
it's absolutely like gigging. And this is something that me and John talk about a lot because John also comes from a similar background as I do. John is also a gigging musician, really good one at that.
Mm-hmm.
And John is another person I've learned from. And Joel too, those are two guys who I really learned what things to say yes to and what things to say no to. Mm-hmm. Because again, I guess like you said, piggybacking off of number 2, I realized these guys are doing really well for themselves. And I need to pay attention to see what they're doing because they're in their own lane. But anyway, there's situations where there's a gig where maybe I know somebody will be there or the gig is for somebody who I want to be connected with. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's only paying $50 or $100.
Right.
It's probably worth it to take it.
Mm-hmm.
If not, even if it's not a connection that's gonna shoot me to the top, mm-hmm. maybe it's just somebody that I want to know.
Right.
And excuse me, there's situations where a gig is $200, $300, $400, but there's like 3 rehearsals and the gig is an hour away, and it's like,
I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. So there's so many variables. Maybe there's a situation where, a gig I did yesterday pays like, $60, but it's close. And
you're a better man than me.
Really?
I'm not coming out of the house for less than $1,000.
I feel, let me just say this. Guys, if you ask me to do a gig for $60, I probably will not even text you back or hit you back.
No offense.
Yeah. Well, I would feel offended. But the gig, it's at I don't want to say where it is just for, I don't want to put numbers out there or anything, but it's for a good cause.
Right.
And it's close by, and it's a gig that I do with friends, so in that case it's worth it.
Right.
And there's some gigs that are no money, or even gigs that I've done with well-known people where I was told I was going to get paid and I didn't get paid,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But through those gigs I was able to meet certain people that did shoot me to the top, or that did put me in front of people that I want to know,
Right.
So yeah, those are just instances of my own where I had to make the decision to say yes or to say no. Mm-hmm. And it's something that we're still perfecting to this day.
Oh yeah.
That's life though. Yep. You have to figure out, okay, maybe if I eat this chicken wing or I eat these 10, 15 chicken wings. I'm vegan, by the way, guys. I don't eat chicken wings. But how am I going to feel later?
Oh, my gosh.
Do I have a ginger ale on the side that's going to, ease out all the grease? That was my best example.
Right.
But yeah, that's life.
Right. Well, with that being said, let's talk about some specific ways that our listeners can make some money, man. And I think we've already covered a few, with teaching being one. That's definitely, I mean, to be able to teach, you have to have some expertise and some authority in that field. Last year I taught a class, and it was great, man. I, especially just on the strength of like the relationships I was able to gain from teaching that class. I'm pretty sure a few of those guys in that class are going to be listening. I know they have been listening to the podcast, so shout out to those guys, because they really, they don't even know, but they were even a big part of helping me hone in on how to serve the producer community a lot better through Soul Surplus. So but yeah, I taught classes on building a brand, certain types of techniques for networking, getting to know people, taught a class on licensing, and yeah, it was a great class. I think I charged like $25 per student, and we had 6 classes. Actually, technically it was 12 classes, because it was two dates per class. And so we would do them on a Wednesday night and a Friday night, and we'd be on there for about, I think we were on there for about 2.5 to 3 hours. It's like a 3-hour class, $25, 10 student max. And, just off of that, that was a nice little bit of revenue, that I was able to make there. And the funny thing is the money was cool, but there were so many things that I learned from teaching that class that are helping us to make more revenue with Soul Surplus, so some of those things are kind of priceless. So, but yeah, teaching could be one thing. Obviously I was teaching more from a production standpoint. John has been and still continues to teach from a musicianship standpoint.
And I think we should really list the pros and cons.
Okay.
I don't want to be a pessimist.
Right.
But day in and day out, it's just exhausting when your students don't practice. That's probably the biggest con.
Gotcha.
One of my biggest pet peeves.
Right. And I think that's with any teaching profession though.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Gary V, for those, Gary Vaynerchuk, he talks all the time about how people watch his channel all the time and they listen to his videos, and he's like, 98% of the people that watch this every day will not do exactly what I told them to do.
Yeah, that's
and
real.
It's the truth, even, I'm not trying to badmouth some of the guys in my class, but there were some things that I taught the guys to do, and they were like, yeah, man, let's do it. And, I follow them on social media, and they're kind of dragging their feet with certain things,
Yeah.
And I understand, like, from the standpoint of, that life gets in the way and things like that. But like, if this is really what you want to do as a profession, like, you got to go in, like, you can't drag your feet. So I definitely, but I empathize with you on that.
Yeah. I think this next one is really more of your expertise, which is selling beats, because I don't really have any experience with that hustle. So could you talk more about that one?
Yeah. So selling beats, it's interesting because, like, right now selling beats is different than it was totally different than when I first started. But I think that right now is the perfect time. Low key, it's like kind of like a perfect time to sell beats. You just have to understand the consumer and the market right now. And so a lot of times what I tell guys is, do production, but you don't necessarily have to quote unquote sell beats. You can literally create a YouTube page, and you can, my good friend Homage does this, right? So he has a YouTube page. He uploads beats every day. Monday, it's really Monday through Friday, but I would say 6 days a week he's uploading. So what happens is he has a like a BeatStars page. So not only are you going to be able to hear the beats on YouTube, but then if you like it, then you can go and you can download the rights for that song on his website and lease the beat. So he owns it outright. But basically it's like there's a whole bunch of people that are going to use this song, but you can rap over it for a nominal fee. But the crazy thing is that what people don't recognize is he's actually making money from multiple angles. So he's not only making money from selling beats and getting like licensing on that side, that's the obvious side, but he's also monetized his channel. And so because he's built up a following, he's, you know, I think he's over 50,000 followers now. Every time he posts a beat, you know, it's getting spins like tens of thousands, some of them hundreds of thousands of times. Wow. I think he's actually got one that's got like either one or two that has like, you know, a million spins. And so what happens is you can throw ads against that, and then you can make revenue off of Google for, you know, basically ad click revenue. And so, you know, it's the perfect time to do your thing. It's just that people don't want to put the time in, you know, for whatever reason. So, you know, my response to that is usually very blunt. You know, I'm always like, then you just don't want to do it. You know, if you don't find yourself up, like think about all the times, like think about like our company now, we wouldn't be able to do our company if there weren't hundreds of days and nights where we work throughout the day and all through the night.
Right.
100%. You know, so unless you don't want to do that, especially in the very beginning, just stick to your day job.
Yeah. Yeah, there's too many 3-hour naps that should be sleep.
Exactly. Exactly.
And of course, I don't think it's right to, not that you are glorifying it, but the goal is to not have to do that. You have to do that, absolutely, but I think the goal is to live a life where, hey, maybe now I can get a little more sleep because I don't have to worry about making all this much money because I've already done the things that I need to do for this week, you know?
Yep.
You know,
just get all the heavy lifting done in the front end. You know, right. when we started the company, man, I promise you, for the first 3 months, I don't think I went to bed before 2:00.
Really?
Yeah, cause I couldn't, because I had to answer customer emails. There was like, you know, website stuff that needed to get done. In the very beginning, I was doing a lot more on the music side as comparison to now, where I really don't do anything on the music side outside of doing a couple of instrumentals here and there. And that's really more because like I'm trying to alleviate some of the stress of the team. But like, yeah, I wanted it. I wanted it bad. Like I want 5 years from now to have paid my daughter's entire college tuition, and she's not going to be in college in 5 years. She's still going to be in school.
Right.
You know, but I want that to be taken care of. I want my retirement fund to be looking super nice 5 years from now. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? And that's the thing. It's, you know, I work to not have to worry later on.
Right.
That's why I work. And so unless you're willing to put in the hours, don't cry and complain because nobody listens to your stuff. Don't cry and complain because things are different than the way they used to be. You know, especially like older guys, and I'm not trying to go off on a tangent. Older guys get on my nerves now. They're just like, oh man, these new kids and blah, 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 blah. It's like, bro, you're not 18, you're not 19. You don't think the way they think. That's why it doesn't make any sense to you. But maybe if you would sit down and with a younger person and say, what makes you think that this is okay? Like, perfect example. What makes a 16-year-old think that they should not have to pay for music?
Yeah. And
they're going to look at you and they're going to say, I don't know, because I just never had to.
Right.
And the discussion. So the next part of that conversation is not, well, I think it's wrong. And I think that, you know, there's people that work hard on this. They don't care. So the fact that they don't care, you need to figure out a different way to reach that kid and to possibly, sounds terrible, to try to get $1 out of him.
Yeah. I mean? But you know what? That I think the point you said really goes back to getting rid of your pride.
Facts.
Like I just remember a lot of times where like I would be playing, I would be playing in church, and there was an older guitarist next to me, and I was playing, and I'll never forget the day he said, "Yeah, like your guitar is unacceptable. Like this is unacceptable. This is not good." I was like, "Geez." Well,
oh my God.
That's the kind of person he was.
Oh my gosh.
But you know what? It was very necessary. Bars. Very necessary. Sorry, I'm digressing. Can't help myself. But yeah, I like the fact that all the things we're saying coincide with the other points we made, because you got to reinvent yourself. You got to know, all right, like me making boom bap beats and trying to sell them with no marketing behind. Not that boom bap beats are anything wrong with them, but like
J. Cole just put out a whole album with boom bap.
Yeah, a Tribe Called Cole.
Yeah.
But if you don't market it the right way, then yeah, you're gonna look like you're 48.
Yeah, straight up. Speaking of Cole, our next sample pack that comes out tomorrow was inspired by the Cole record, but I digress. Go ahead, keep going.
Oh yeah. That's gonna be heat. I heard some of it this weekend. Pretty crazy.
Yep.
But the third method and our second to last method is gigging, which I know you've done some gigging, because I know you're a keyboard player, right, Wes?
I hate gigging. I can't stand it. And you know why? Because growing up in church, that's what you do, but it's not called gigging, it's called visiting the other church.
Facts. Yeah, I think some of the cons of gigging is definitely the travel and the lifestyle, having to carry lots of stuff. I really feel like gigging, unless you're very, very smart about it, is really a young man's game, and not that I'm old, not old at all, and I still do gig, but I saw it very early on. I knew, all right, there's no way I'm going to be able to keep this up, especially if I want to have a family.
Right.
And, there's no way I'm going to be able to keep this up by the time I'm like 40. Am I still going to be like, playing in a bar when I'm 40?
Right.
I don't want to do that, But some of gigging does have really, really, really great benefits. If you like to perform like I do, it's just a great release and it's a great expression.
Right.
You get to be on stage. You get to play music, hopefully, that you like. And yeah, I really feel like the best part. Oh, and the lump sum of money is good too.
Yeah, absolutely.
To me, it's more. It can be more consistent than getting a placement, like a production placement.
Right.
So what I mean by that is, oh man, the amount of time you have to wait. First of all, when labels want something from you, like they want the stems, they want them right away.
Then you get paid 6 months from then.
6 months. That was something I learned. I'm like, this, like I'm used to coming from the world of gigging where you have
get paid
to
after the show.
You get paid after the show, and not always, but many times. But you have to be really, you kind of got to be a little gutter about it. Like, where's my money? Not that you got to be rude, but like sometimes it gets there,
Right.
But it's just a different world in production. Now there is definitely times where you have to say, like, hey, I'm gonna get paid at this time, or I need my money by then, or whatever. But it's gigging is, let's say you get like, I don't know, you get a rack for a placement, and that happens over 6 weeks. or sorry, 6 months. Hopefully you got other stuff that you're doing, but if you're gigging, you know, you can make that in like, depending on what you're doing, you can make that in a week and keep going, you know?
Right. Yep.
So yeah, I think that's one of the pros to it, is it can be very consistent, but the cons, like we said, it wears you out a little bit.
Right.
When you're going that hard. And, you know, there's rehearsals, which depending on the gig, if you're doing gigs for indie artists, they can probably pay you for the gig, but the rehearsal is a lot of times not paid, you know, on a local level.
Yep.
So yeah, it's sort of like, I guess I'll say this to wrap up the gigging thing. It's sort of like the 98%, 2% kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
For the 98%, it's a hustle. It is a true hustle, especially if you're doing wedding bands and you're doing cover gigs or you're playing for an artist. It is a hustle.
Right.
For the 2% that are, you know, doing tours with like Guns N' Roses and doing tours with like Taylor Swift,
right?
Is, you know, and even that is, it's, the actual gig is nice. And even with those guys, like, there's a documentary on Netflix called Hired Gun, which talks about this. It's really amazing. But you know, even then, there's some cons in that. But yeah, it's a 98.2% kind of thing.
Right. Nice. Now we have one last thing that we were saying, but I don't want to talk about that specifically because I don't think that's a good tip or a good method, because the majority of the people that listen to our podcast, they can't do that. So
yeah.
But what I will say, and we'll say this and we'll wrap it up. There's so many things that revolve around music production that can like get you to a place where you're making, you know, either right then and there, you're making money off of a transaction, or you're making money passively. And so if you're a producer, there's so many different avenues that you can go down. So if you look at your production and you say, you know, what do I do in my production that I feel like is super strong? What do I do in my production that sticks out in comparison to everybody else? So, you know, if I'm a producer and it's just like, you know, I've noticed that a whole bunch of people have come up to me and they've said, hey man, I really love the way you do drums. Then the next logical step after hearing that 5 to 10 times is, oh man, you know what? I could probably monetize that, you know?
Yeah.
So I need to figure out a way to create a how-to guide on making your drums sound like this. Or some people might say, I love the way that you mix your beats. So I need to create a how-to guide on how to mix your beats. And then there's a deep dive in that. So it's there's an overall how to mix your beats, but then there's the next how-to is how to mix your beats for East Coast production, how to mix your beats for trap, how to mix your beats for West Coast, how to mix your beats for pop and EDM. You can have one particular road that you can go down, but once you go down that road, man, there's a whole bunch of different thoroughways and driveways and, you know what I'm saying, side streets that you can hit, that you could turn into something beneficial for yourself. And I just don't think that people think outside of the box enough, and they don't think of themselves as authority figures in this particular thing, to realize that they can really do some damage with it. So you may not make a lot of money right away, you know, especially if you want to turn this into the YouTube grind, or, you know, nowadays, like there's a lot of people switching over to Twitch, which I would recommend, because I feel like Twitch is more catered to the creator. There's better ways for you to be able to make money off of what you do best. So you have to stop thinking about, like, how many times, and you've been privy to this, Smythe, how many times have we've had discussions in the office where we talk about, I wish that guys would understand that they don't have to always have their name on everything. It doesn't have to always be about them. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to always hit the home run. Like, make this into a trade. Like I said earlier, make yourself a tradesman out of this. You know, stop trying to make it glamorous. Like, everybody's not going to be the $1 million broker. Like, somebody has to fix the electricity, bro. Somebody has to do the plumbing. Somebody has to be the janitor. And guess what? Those guys that do that stuff, they do okay, man. They make pretty good money, and it's a job that's never going to go away.
Because they fulfill a need.
They fulfilling exactly. Yeah. So get your hands dirty, figure out what you do best, figure out how to monetize that, and man, you'd be surprised at how far that you can go. So
yeah, I think what I get out of what you're saying, and this is probably an honorable mention for another tip, you know. You have to know how to do different things. You have to try a lot of different things.
Yep.
I think the reason why I ended up, working for Soul Surplus is because I play guitar, I play bass, I gig, I teach, I produce. I'm learning how to engineer.
Yep.
Learning how to mix, learning how to master. I just listed 8 different things where, let's say if I tried to only pursue one of those things, or I just only learned one of those things, I definitely would not be where I am. I would be super frustrated.
Right.
And very upset. And and what you said also ties into not being prideful.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
But yeah, don't be prideful. Don't be too proud to say I need to be the next this. I need to be the next that. For some people, they have that trajectory, and I know that we know people who definitely have that trajectory. It's like, yeah, you definitely have everything it takes to be, the face of something.
Right.
But for the average person, because that group of people who have that amazing kind of quality and talent, honestly, they're in a minority.
Right.
But for the rest of us, there's how many other jobs? An NFL team is 52 players. The staff is like crazy. There's equipment. What's the name for it? It has some kind of crazy name. The people who like fix the equipment, like equipment engineers or technicians or whatever. You have doctors. You have nutritionists. You have like coordinators, coaches. You have like the team boosters. Like there's so many different jobs, and like you said, we need all of those people. Like those jobs are never gonna go away.
Right.
You don't have to be Peyton Manning. You don't have to be Tom Brady.
Yep. You
don't have to be, Barry Sanders. I went back with that one. Why did I name the 3 oldest players? That shows y'all don't even watch the NFL that much anymore. All I know is players over 35. You don't have to be Reggie White.
Yeah, right.
I think every player that I named a few NFL players today, and they're all mad old. But yeah, you can't be prideful. You gotta fulfill a need. You gotta know how to do a lot of things. You gotta learn. You gotta put the work in, and that's something I can say. I have to put on every day. I have to make the decision. Like it's, I know we're going on a little bit, but man, like sometimes I just think about, like the way the mind is. I'm like, man, now I gotta like mic up this guitar amp. I gotta put the XLR in the snake, and like now I gotta find a tone. Like it's so much, but then I'm just like, but I like to do these things.
Yep.
And I need to do these things, and I love to do these things.
It beats sitting in a cubicle every day.
It sure, or in a bookstore.
Yeah.
Making way less. So
yeah, man.
Yeah, like it's a passion,
For sure. Well, I think that's going to about wrap it up for this week's episode. Like I said, we were really excited to discuss this, and the fact that we were able to keep it within just a little over an hour is a miracle in and of itself, because I know I could go off on a nice little tangent on a few of these points, but we were able to keep it in the pocket, And we hope that you guys enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe to the podcast. We are featured on SoundCloud as well as iTunes. And for whatever reason, it's taking forever to come up on Google Play and Stitcher, which I will double check on why that issue still persists. But come check us out. Check out our former episodes, and we'll see you guys next week. Peace.
See you guys. Thanks for listening.